Today, over 1 billion children live in cities. We know that actually their caregivers, those who care for babies and toddlers, have a huge impact on the lives of these kids and their healthy development. And that has implications throughout the rest of their life, through adolescence and adulthood. In this lesson, you'll learn more about the developmental characteristics of babies and toddlers, and also a little bit about their caregivers, so that you can then make those connections about how cities can better address their needs.
If we change the beginning of the story, we can change the whole story. The early years of life, from before birth to about 5 years old, are a window of opportunity to improve lives. Babies and toddlers' brains develop rapidly, and relatively small changes at this young age can have lifelong effects. If you think back to your own childhood, what do you remember? A moment of discovery or play, maybe a smile or hug from a parent. These early experiences may seem fleeting, but the first years actually have so much to do with how the following decades turn out. Now, of course, destinies aren't set in stone, but early childhood experiences really do have lifelong impacts. And this isn't just folk wisdom, it's backed by longitudinal scientific studies. Scientists, public health specialists, and economists alike are unequivocal on the importance of the early years. There's just no better window of opportunity to transform a child's outcomes. The impacts of the early years are really profound, long-lasting, and they touch all aspects of life, from learning potential to future health and earnings. The thing is, it's actually much more difficult and costly to try and address issues like developmental delays or health problems as children grow and move into adulthood. Despite the evidence of the importance of acting early, millions of young children and their caregivers do not receive the support they need. The thing is, the early years are the time when brain development is at its most rapid. So people used to think that babies' brains were a fog of confusion. And now we actually know that babies are the quickest learning humans on Earth. And how they develop is really dependent on the behaviors of their caregivers. So the brain is made up of billions of neurons, and these neurons are connected by synapses. They sort of form different pathways through the landscapes of the brain, and everything that the brain does, all of our memories, emotions, logic, actions, that all emerges from the flow of signals between these neurons along these synapses, these pathways. Now, some of the pathways are used more often than others, and the more you use a pathway, the quicker and easier it becomes to use it again. Early experiences really shape the development of these pathways in the brain. So babies between the age of 0 to 3 are making over 1 million new connections every second. And sometime between around 8 months and 3 years, depending upon which part of the brain we're talking about, the pathways that haven't been used so much sort of get overgrown, like a forgotten path through a jungle. And the pathways that get used the most really become established and like highways, so it's easy to travel along them. So what does this mean? What it means is, if a young child or a baby has repeated positive experiences, then those are the mental highways that are most likely to get established, those positive reinforcement dynamics. The flip side of that, of course, is that if a child experiences strong, frequent, or prolonged adversity, such as physical or emotional abuse, caregiver mental illness maybe affects the way their caregivers are treating them, or maybe they're exposed to violence within the household, then this kind of creates what we call a toxic stress response. And that really can disrupt the development of brain architecture and sort of strengthen these negative pathways. And by the age of 4, children already have developed about half of the cognitive skills of an adult. So we see how important it is to make sure that kids have this positive experiences in the first years of life so that we can develop those positive mental pathways. So how do we build brain infrastructure that will make it easier for an infant to thrive? Basically, children need 2 things. They need caregivers who are responsive and nurturing, just as we were just discussing, and they need environments that are safe and stimulating. So when we take the first one, the caregivers, they provide for young children's basic needs, and they create a stable environment, and they can protect children from stress. So when parents and other caregivers are talking, singing, playing with their babies, they're actually helping to build a healthy brain that's wired to learn and interact with others and manage their own emotions. And lots of studies actually have shown that warm, stimulating, and responsive caregiving is actually one of the best predictors of how children are going to do in school and whether or not they subsequently grow up to become happy and healthy and productive adults. So actually, the well-being of their caregivers, of those parents, and the behaviors of those parents and caregivers really have a defining impact on the child. And of course, the way that we design our cities has an impact on how much stress caregivers are feeling, how caregivers are feeling, and also the types of behaviors that they do or don't practice with their kids. So in addition to the behaviors of caregivers, we know that cities can be wonderful places to grow up, but they can also really pose some serious challenges for the health and well-being of babies, toddlers, and the people who care for them. You know, if there's lack of nature, lack of safe spaces to play, they're exposed to air pollution, if caregivers are stuck in traffic and therefore don't have time to spend with their kids, some people may face social isolation, which can contribute to, caregiver depression and stress. So we need to really think about how the city is impacting both the toddlers and babies directly, but also their caregivers. And what we know is that babies, toddlers, and their caregivers actually experience the city in unique ways. And that really can affect their development and have some lifelong effects. So we at the Bernard Van Neer Foundation are driven by this simple question. If you could experience the city from 95 centimeters, which is the height of a healthy 3-year-old, what would you change? So if you think about it, we now have more than 1 billion children living in cities, and rapid urbanization means that number is growing. So really making safe and healthy environments where basic services are easily available is really essential to giving all children a good start to life. Cities can encourage and support frequent, warm, and responsive caregiver interactions, and they can provide stimulating spaces to play and explore. They can also take steps to really ensure that caregivers are supported and help to reduce their stress so that they can better take care of their kids. These foundations are really essential for babies and toddlers' brain building. And investing in these environments and these services and in promoting these behaviors can help cities to ensure that they deliver a healthy, peaceful, and creative society where young children and their families can thrive. So children and their caregivers are more likely to have healthy development and experience well-being when they have access to at least these 3 things. The first is clean air. Sounds pretty basic, but we know more and more that the effects of poor air quality are actually disproportionately falling on the youngest, especially in low-income areas. It turns out that babies absorb 2 to 3 times more air pollution than adults because of their faster breathing. And their organs are also more delicate and more prone to the adverse impact of air pollution. What we've learned as well recently is that exposure starts during pregnancy. So the exposure of pregnant women to air pollution has impacts on their children's development. And this has been shown in a number of studies. Second is nature. So exposure to nature for play and exercise and rest is beneficial for the mental and physical health of everyone. This includes caregivers, but also their kids, of course, and their babies. And there are studies that show that young children experience reduced stress and, of course, better physical and mental development when they have regular access to nature. So the third thing is really about this proximity to services and healthy spaces. So we really need to work to ensure easy access to key early years services like healthcare, childcare, and social support, and inviting public spaces like parks and squares. And then we need to give parents and caregivers different mobility options so that they can easily get to these places and make good use of them. And we know that this is going to be critical to ensuring that caregivers and young kids actually make good use of these public amenities that we're providing towards them. Just as a simple example, we know that like toddlers, they need double the amount of time to cross the streets compared to able-bodied adults. So even thinking about the timing of our traffic lights and whether that's allowing toddlers and a caregiver with several kids to move around is one thing. Another example is that caregivers with young kids have specific mobility needs, which transport systems need to better serve. Instead of just going to work in the morning and coming back in the evening, they may do things like trip chaining, where they have to go to several different sites during the day. And a lot of times our transportation systems and mobility options are not yet really set up to allow them to do that easily. So government and policymakers can help caregivers really break down the barriers to healthy development of young children, by providing early childhood services and by thinking about the design of public spaces and mobility solutions. Thing is, young children and families require support from multiple sectors and from other members of their community. And so we really need to think about how we can bring together all of these actors so that we can create these high standard urban environments that are really essential to providing conditions for the healthy brain development of these kids. So it's because of this that we actually say that Think Babies is actually an inclusive design principle. Because of the fact of babies and toddlers and their caregivers' vulnerability, their dependency, their drive to explore and play, it sort of means that if a space is healthy and safe and clean and interesting for them, it'll actually work for anyone, regardless of their age. And so we really aim to encourage cities to create spaces where children can grow, learn, create, imagine, and play across all neighborhoods, reaching as many families as possible. So over the course of this course, in the next several lessons, you're going to really dive deeper to understand the needs that babies and toddlers and their caregivers have, the critical behaviors that we want to promote in caregivers, and figure out how cities can promote these and create safe and stimulating environments for all children.